What's up, y'all? It's your host, Sierra Simone, and you're watching The Women's Vault. So, welcome back to another episode of the Women's Vault podcast, where we have real talk and share real stories about the everyday things that us as women go through and how we overcome them and flourish. Today's episode will actually be a very special one to me. It's called The Power of Vulnerability. There is strength in softness. And why it's so special to me is because if y'all haven't noticed, I have personally been MIA. These last 2.5 weeks has been hell on earth for me. Um, I won't share the details of everything that's been happening only because it's something that I'm still working through and still in the middle of going through. But I feel like, God always aligns things in the perfect timing because as I was prepping for this episode before my life blew up in front of my eyes, I was struggling to try to find examples and different anecdotes and stuff like that to share with you guys when it comes to the topic of vulnerability. I feel like me naturally as a person, I've just always kind of been vulnerable, and for me, I needed to do better with not like picking and choosing who I'm vulnerable with. So, trying to figure out those examples were a little hard, but God being God, plopped something down in my life for me to share with y'all. So I do want to apologize to my vault babies for being MIA, but we're back. We're better. I've been feeling emotionally and mentally like crap. And so, I had to, as my best friend would say, put that shit on. I just got a little cute, not going nowhere, not doing nothing. But hey, sometimes when you look good, you feel good. So that's the end goal here, is for me to feel better, right? So let's get into it. What exactly does it mean to be vulnerable, right? When we hear the word vulnerable, we can think about it in different contexts. You have groups of individuals who are typically more vulnerable, say for instance, the elderly. They're more vulnerable to financial, emotional, physical abuse, stuff like that, right? But when we speak about vulnerability in today's episode, we're talking about it more so in a social and relational setting, whether it's a romantic relationship, business relationship, whatever type of relationship it is, just a friendship, whatever the case may be, right? So what exactly is vulnerability? So to be vulnerable means to be open to the possibility of being hurt, either physically or emotionally, and sometimes mentally, and exposing oneself to potential harm or judgment by sharing one's true self and feelings. So that's a lot. So let's unpack it. So, growing up, society has always told us, be strong, you got this, don't cry. And I know this is the Women's Vault podcast, but the things that we talk about here also goes for men as well. And so a lot of times we're taught to basically keep those things in. You can't trust anyone, all of these toxic things that keep you from really expressing yourself and showing your true self to individuals. It's kind of like, what if we need that? Which, as humans, we all come to a point in time where ultimately we need to release those feelings. We need to talk to somebody. We need to share how we truly feel on the inside. And so I think the first step in us working on our vulnerability with others is to reframe our ideology surrounding vulnerability, right? So instead of it being something that makes us weak, that destroys relationships and stuff of that nature, what if we think of it more so as it being a courageous act? Because it takes a lot for someone to really dig down and make themselves susceptible to aggression or anger, or you don't know what that person is going to say or do when you open your true self up to them and tell them how you're feeling, right? So it could be a whole bunch of different things, whether it's a deep, dark secret that you've always had, or, for the LGBTQ community, if you're telling somebody that you were really born a man, like that's vulnerability. Like, so you're putting yourself in a position to be potentially hurt, right? And we're going to talk about later how to recognize who you can be vulnerable with versus who you can't. But you're putting yourself in this position to possibly be hurt, whether it's emotionally, physically, or mentally. So that takes a lot of courage to be able to do. And a lot of people don't have that courage because the fear of being hurt outweighs their desire to have that tension within themselves be released. Instead of thinking of it as something that destroys relationships, think of it something that will build a connection. When you're vulnerable with someone, especially if it's your first time being vulnerable with someone, a lot of the times they may feel even just a little bit more comfortable with sharing their most inner thoughts and stuff with you. And so, to me personally, I feel like when someone is pouring their heart out to me and they're telling me things about themselves and their thoughts and their emotions that most other people won't know, for me personally, I feel like it's an honor that that person trusts me enough to be able to share these things with me, and that they entrust that I'll, keep them to myself, and that I won't harm them emotionally or attack them for how they truly feel. And so I feel like if we look at it as something of that nature, more people would be more open to being vulnerable with those that they love. Like I said before, it also depends on who you're being vulnerable with, right? And another way for us to reframe the ideology of vulnerability is looking at it as a way to boost our confidence, right? I feel like growing up, especially like our parents, I just turned 28, so our parents, the generations before us, they looked at vulnerability as something to tear you down. And so it sucks, but I mean, they were dead wrong. I'm not even gonna sit here and sugarcoat it. They were dead wrong for that. And so it brought down a lot of people's confidence, especially those who are vulnerable. And then you have all of these people yelling and shouting at you that you're a wuss, or that was my grandma's favorite word, was or um you sassy, or you're too emotional, or you share your business too much, and everything doesn't have to always be shared, but everything doesn't always have to be kept behind closed doors either. It's all about balance. Yeah, just thinking of it as a confidence booster. And so, the first point I made of it being a courageous act, it takes a lot of courage to be able to be vulnerable with someone. And so, if I accomplish this goal of getting this said thing off of my chest and I tell this person, I'm going to feel a boost of confidence. Now, if they react in a negative way, I may not feel that confidence initially because I'm dealing with the negative repercussions of my actions, of deciding to tell them. But even after dealing with that, even if you don't recognize it, you'll start to feel a little bit better once you get it off your chest. And you'll feel like you're able to start being more vulnerable more often. And so I know for me personally, I've had moments in my life where I've been vulnerable with people and things have went well. Our connection got stronger. I felt like they understood me better. I felt like, they started to be more vulnerable with me. And I felt like I found a place where I could truly be myself. There has also been times where I have been vulnerable with someone and it completely backfired in my face. And that actually happened to me recently. Something big happened in my life and I was sharing how I felt, sharing how the entire situation made me feel, just being very open and honest about my feelings. And this person was acting like, I'm going to be supportive of you. I got you, this, that, the third. And then when it came time to be supportive, it wasn't happening. I mean, it was not happening. And even though in this instant, I did not have a negative initial reaction from this person, it still hits hard because it's kind of like, okay, I opened up my true feelings to you, right? And I'm telling you how I feel. And nobody else really knows how I'm feeling just yet because I have a very small group of people. I could probably count on one hand how many people I can just be open and honest with. And I hadn't talked to these other people yet. And so yeah, it tore me apart and it made the situation as well as everything else I was going through 10 times worse. It made me feel like what was the point in even saying anything to this person? I would have been better off without this person even knowing. And it really hurt me because I felt like I analyzed the situation in a decent manner. I felt as if, we had built a decent enough friendship for us to be able to do the vulnerability thing back and forth, but I guess not. Guess not. And, y'all already know I'm going through a lot right now. Like I'm jabless. I know it's job, but I keep saying jab. I'm jabless. Bills due. I'm a mom full time still. I'm doing my best with this podcast stuff as well as trying to learn all of these policies and loan products when it comes to being a mortgage loan officer. And yeah, it's so much trying to stay healthy, eat healthy, make sure my kid eats healthy, make sure I work out 4 to 5 times a week, maintain social relationships and all of these other things. And then I had this situation happen that I didn't think would affect me that much. And everything outside of the situation, plus my friends' lack of support in the situation after they promised their support kind of took me over the ledge. Yeah, took me over the ledge. I've been in bed this entire week, just laid up. I have tried to get up. I've gotten up and went to the gym. But outside of that, I haven't had any energy to do anything. I literally have felt myself feeling like I'm like falling into a slight depression, but God forbid, I will not have the spirit of depression take over. God is good all the time, and I just been in my word and doing what I need to do to fight this. And so that's why your girl had to get dressed today and put that shit on because I felt bad. But anywho, how do you discern whether or not someone is deserving of your vulnerability? So a few things that I look for is, what does their emotional intelligence look like? And I think this is where I messed up in my situation. The emotional intelligence wasn't necessarily there. But hey, we live and we learn. And so is there a presence of emotional intelligence? You know, how are they with their other friends? How do they react to situations in their lives? How has our interactions been thus far? You know, is it always good? Have we had any type of adversity as of yet? These are all things to take into consideration. Excuse me. Who are they as a person? And there's a plethora of different things that you can look at and analyze when it comes to you having a relationship with someone, and determining whether or not they're worthy of your vulnerability. And so that's just something that we want to make sure that we always keep in mind, because I used to be that person that just would open up to anybody. Not no more. I've gotten very good with discerning who I can and can't talk to, but I guess because I've been going through so much, I've had so much on my plate. I did not discern in the best way possible this time around. And so that's on me. But you live and you learn. So yeah, you just want to make sure that you're really looking at these things. I feel safe with this person. Does this person make me feel safe? not just physically, but like emotionally, mentally. Does this person tell me that, it's okay if I want to open up? I am one of those people, and especially with men, I do this because a lot of times men feel like they can't open up. If I have a guy that I'm conversing with, whether it's a romantic interest, a friend, whatever, I always want to make sure that I am creating a safe space for them because I never want a man to feel like I'm the reason why he can't trust nobody. I have an ex, um, and I was very terrible to. I was young. I think I was like 17. I was very terrible to him. And I personally feel like the things that happened in our relationship dramatically altered the way that he went about seeking out other women. And years later, like I apologized to him. I felt so bad because I was a little bitch back then. I was not this woman I am today. But yeah, I just want to make sure that I'm creating a safe space for people to feel like they can open up. And I'm never going to make anyone feel like that they have to open up, but I am going to make sure that it's known to them that this is a safe space if you feel like I'm worthy of your vulnerability. And so I feel like a lot more people should take the time to do that in the friendships that they have, the relationships that they have, the relationships that they're building. This is a safe space. And I want you to know that. Like, I'm not going to judge you. I don't care what it is. Because a lot of times people just need to hear that. A lot of times we assume that people don't want to hear our crap, or we assume that we're going to be a burden to someone if we share our innermost feelings with them. But a lot of times people crave for that type of intimate conversation because vulnerability is a form of intimacy. It's just not a physical form of intimacy. And so for me personally, especially when it's a man that I am like dating, I love when my man feels comfortable enough to open up to me about how he feels, even if I may not understand it in that moment, because I know there's a lot of things that I won't understand because I'm not a man, and there's a lot of things that he won't understand because he's not a woman. But for you to feel comfortable enough to open up to me about how you're feeling, if you're having a bad day, and you just want to tell me about it, if you just want to vent, cool. And I know a lot of guys feel like that they can't do that because there are a lot of women out there who will bash men for their vulnerability. And let me just say, ladies, that is not okay. I'm not sitting here advocating for men to be running around crying every 2 seconds. However, if your man is having a bad day and he just needs to get it off his chest and just wants to just vent or just talk about it, even if it's just for 60 seconds, allow him the space to. Especially if y'all are supposed to be partners, especially if you guys are married. How do you expect your man to protect and provide if he is at a 2%? So we just need to be more mindful about these things, right? Because men and women need spaces to where they can be vulnerable at. And I personally feel like we should be able to be vulnerable with someone of the opposite sex. Like, for instance, with my best friend is a male. He's never tried me. He's never tried to kiss me. He ain't never tapped my booty. He ain't never. I have been blackout drunk around this man, and he's never tried it. He put me on his recliner. He threw me a water bottle, threw me a pillow, and threw me a blanket, and said, "I'll see you in the morning." So, I feel like that's why these platonic friendships with the opposite sex are so important because sometimes your boys might not have the best sound advice to give you. It's okay to get a woman's perspective because women and men are biologically just created different. And there's no way around it. We are just biologically created different. We mentally think different, like how we process things are different. Like God intended for us to be two different beings, He created us differently, intentionally, so that the masculine and feminine energies could balance each other out. And that's why we are partners. But that's why it's so important to, I feel like, to have friends of the opposite sex. It's been times where I've had men problems and I felt like the men were in the wrong. And I go ask my best friend, like, da 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 da. And I'm just going off. And he'd be like, see, you tripping. You tripping. For real. Like, and he'll explain why. He'll explain it in a way that I'm able to receive it. And I'm able to be vulnerable with him in that space without judgment. And sometimes there's certain people in your life that you would think that you're able to be vulnerable with at any time, but there are certain situations where you do need a outside person to be vulnerable with, because sometimes vulnerability is harder when there are certain situations going on. So, like, if you're in a relationship and things are just super heated between y'all, and you're trying to understand where your man is coming from, right? But you just cannot hear him out, and you're not receptive of it because you're so angry and tense about what's going on. Sometimes you need that outside opinion. Sometimes you need to be vulnerable, and not just vulnerable with just anyone. That's why I'm being very nitpicky when I keep bringing this up, because I'm not saying to go just be vulnerable and talk to anybody. Talk to somebody who has experience with that type of situation, who has worked their way through that type of situation, not just your random single friend who ain't had a nigga in 10 years and is very argumentative. Like, no, but like being intentional about the people that you're vulnerable with. And so that way you can get the right kind of response back in order to really either get a solution to your problem or just get the support that you need in the situation that you're in. So just think for a second, where do you feel like you're holding back? Where in your life do you feel like you lack vulnerability, right? Is it with love and relationships? Do you feel like that you are afraid to ask for the things that you need? Do you feel like you're able to open up to your partner or romantic interest about the things that you feel inside, why you feel that way, and why you need what you need from them? Do you feel like you're able to do those things? Do you feel like you're able to open up to them about how their words or actions may make you feel, whether they're good or bad? Are you holding back in your career? Are you afraid to speak up? Are you afraid to admit that you don't know anything? Right? How is there any type of growth if you're not able to be vulnerable with yourself? I'm not saying to go cry to your boss or anything like that. If you're not able to be vulnerable and really tune into your inner thoughts and feelings, and this is within yourself, if you're not able to do that, how are you ever really going to grow? Right? If you're afraid to speak up and you know something is wrong, that's a missed opportunity, because that's your chance to show that you really know what you're talking about, boo. That's your chance to gain access to more responsibility, more trust from your boss and your colleagues. That's an opportunity that you just missed out on because you're afraid to speak up. And are you afraid to admit that you're wrong? Admitting that you're wrong or that you don't know everything, that in itself takes a certain level of vulnerability, because now you have to admit that there's a flaw about yourself. And then it also goes into the point of you needing to ask for help. So now you got to be vulnerable with your coworkers and tell them, look, man, I thought I knew this and I don't. So that you're opening yourself up to a, man, you should already know this. Or, man, we learned this day one. Or, I'm not about to waste my time helping you. If you don't know it by now, then you're opening yourself up to emotional hurt by these people or mental hurt by these people. And so vulnerability shows up everywhere in your life, including your career. And are you afraid to be vulnerable in your friendships? Think about this. If you feel like you have a friend and y'all never have any deep conversations, can you truly say that there is vulnerability in you guys' relationship? You guys don't have deep conversations about anything. You guys have very surface level conversations. You guys are just talking about what's going on in the world, who did this, who hit who slept with who, how your girlfriend getting on your nerves, how you got all the hoes in the world. But are y'all having genuine, intentional, in-depth conversations about things that are going on, but also how they're making you feel? Talking about why you are the way that you are. Those are different ways that you can be vulnerable with your friends around you and the people that you love. Sharing your innermost thoughts and feelings with your friend. And within the last 2 weeks, and let me just say, I absolutely love my best friend. That man gets on my last nerves. When I say he gets on my last nerve, I mean like I be having like that much left right there. That much nerve left. And he get on it. But when I was going through what I was going through the last couple of weeks, um, there was a point in time where I left the gym. I'm thinking I'm feeling great. Like, I left the gym, I'm feeling great. And guys, I kid you not, I get 5 minutes down the road going home and I am boo-hoo crying. I mean, I'm crying so hard that it's to the point to where, like, the roads are looking blurry. I'm crying that hard. And so luckily I was not far from home, but I called him and it's like I'm hyperventilating. I can't breathe. I legit felt like I was not getting enough oxygen to my brain. I legit felt like I was about to pass out because everything kind of like hit me at once. And, going to the gym, you thinking you're going to feel better. And then 5 minutes after, it all hits you. And so being able to have people that you can call on when you're in spaces like that is a very beautiful and powerful thing. Just imagine what could have happened if I felt like I didn't have anybody to call. A lot of people struggle because they don't have people to talk to when they're in bad mental spaces and they can't admit openly that they're in a bad mental space. I am blessed and honored to be able to have the people in my life that I do, because I know that there are a good strong 3 that I can call on and they will pick up immediately and they will walk me off the edge. They will walk me off the ledge. And so, you know, I don't know what I would do without them. Yeah, I really don't. Even though it's hard to be vulnerable. Like, even with me talking to my best friend these last few weeks about how I've been feeling, it's easy for us to feel like we're a burden. And that's why I go back to saying, making sure that you vocally let people know, like, hey, if you need to get something off your chest, like, I'm here. And I know it's easy for someone to let that go over their heads because a lot of people will say that they're open to hearing you out and then they're not really. But that goes back into analyzing and discerning if they're worthy of your vulnerability. So it kind of goes hand in hand, right? But let's go into how exactly vulnerability equals strength. Like I said, a lot of people will use vulnerability to like bring you down or bash you or judge you. But vulnerability, it makes people relate to us, not judge us. Because a lot of times, and I know specifically with me, I have a lot of people who tell me that they look up to me. I have a lot of people telling me, Sierra, you have been through so much. I really love the woman that you've become, and you inspire me, and you do this and you do that, and you keep going no matter what. And sometimes vulnerability can end up making people take you off of that pedestal that they have you on because it reminds them that you're human. It reminds them that you are relatable, that they are not the only ones who are going through the same kinds of situations that you are and that they are. And so people who have not mastered the concept of vulnerability, sometimes they need to see what vulnerability looks like firsthand. And sometimes that means sharing your own innermost feelings and thoughts so they can see what that looks like firsthand and realize the power behind vulnerability. And so, that's why this episode took so long for me to record. I always knew that I wasn't going to dive too deep into what exactly has been going on in my life, but I knew that it was important for me to kind of just share pieces of what's been going on because why not? You know, but at the same time, I was trying to make sure that I was gonna be on here crying, cause y'all know I'm a crybaby. Yeah, it's and even though I'm not giving specific details as to what has happened in my life within this last month, it honestly is making me feel better by just getting it out, even if I am just talking to my phone right now. But it feels good being able to release that and get that out, being vulnerable with myself because vulnerability starts with oneself. Can't be vulnerable with other people if you don't know how to be vulnerable with yourself, if you don't know how to tap into figuring out how exactly are you feeling and why are you feeling that way. Or even if you know, hey, I'm feeling this way, maybe you can start to think about some of the other things that have been happening recently and trying to connect the dots as to maybe why you feel this way. I've been feeling drained, mentally drained, emotionally drained. I wouldn't necessarily say physically drained, but yeah, mentally and emotionally, I've been drained. So I had to take time to figure out what were the things that were causing me to feel this emotional and mental drainage, draining, whatever. But yeah, so sometimes we just have to stop acting like we have it all together because you're putting this unnecessary pressure on yourself. Like, I felt terribly bad for being in bed for an entire week. But let me just tell y'all, like, this is probably the most vulnerable that you will ever see me on this damn podcast. This week, mentally, I kept telling myself, Sierra, record this episode. Sierra, call these lenders. But let me tell you something. The only thing that I had the energy to do this week is go to the gym. And I had to force myself to do that. And to come home to mentally prepare myself and emotionally prepare myself to be a mother to my child when he got home later that evening. Because I did not want the things that I was going through to affect my child. So that was literally the only thing that I had any energy to do. Because mentally and emotionally pulling myself together was already enough. It was already enough. And that's just the reality of motherhood, especially when you're doing it by yourself in a household. I am the breadwinner. I am the one paying the bills. I am the one making sure we're all fed. I am the one making sure we get to and from activities. I am the one still trying to build a business and a podcast on the side. I have all of this on me. And so I legit had no mental or emotional capacity for anything else other than preparing myself to be a mom later that evening. And yes, it took a full 40 hours to do so. 5 days this week, 8 hours a day. Yes, it did. And I am not ashamed to admit that because sometimes we need the break. Sometimes we need to stop acting like we're so strong. We need to accept the fact that we're not okay. And there's nothing wrong with not being okay. Just don't sit in it for too long. That is the key. So, how exactly do we push through this fear of being vulnerable? When it comes time to share a secret or, tell somebody how we feel or anything of that nature, it's always that thought of what if they judge me? What if they don't accept me? What if they, laugh at me? What if they don't take me serious? I would just say to remind yourself that you're worthy. You are worthy of a positive response from them. Your relationship with them is good enough, is strong enough for you to receive a positive response. And also think to yourself, what if they connect with me instead? Well, instead of immediately going to the negative, think about how great things could be if your vulnerability turns into you guys being able to connect on a deeper level, you guys bettering your friendship, your relationship, whatever the case is, you guys building more trust. So why don't we start to look at vulnerability in that way? So before you get chickened out and decide not to say anything, look at all the positives that could happen. And God forbid, even if stuff does hit the fan, just know, hey, okay, well, maybe I just need to better discern next time of who I share these feelings with. And there's nothing wrong with that. But don't shield yourself off from being vulnerable with people because it's a superpower. So, what are some small steps that we can take to work on our vulnerability? First and foremost, say how you really feel. Even if your voice is a little shaky, even if it takes you 30 minutes to get it out, say how you really feel. Because one thing people, even though someone may not like it, they can respect it, is honesty. I'm big on honesty. I may not like it in the moment, but I can respect the fact that you were honest with me about whatever it is that you wanted to tell me. Because now you've given me a choice to decide on whether or not that's something that I want to deal with or not, versus somebody lying to me and taking my choice away. Right. Another small step to work on vulnerability is sharing one small thing this week that you would normally hide from someone. So even if you're a person who feels as if they have extreme anxiety and you don't talk about it, or if you're depressed and you don't tell anybody, share with somebody. If you're out and about and you're out with a friend and your anxiety shoots up and you normally wouldn't tell them, say, hey friend, my anxiety is up. I'm feeling anxious real bad. Start small. Start real small. Or I'm feeling insecure right now. And maybe share one new thing each week. Start doing it more, opening up more, but still make sure you keep in mind who you're being vulnerable with. And last but not least, the third step is to give yourself grace. I always say this because vulnerability is a muscle that you have to work, that you have to build. And just like any other thing, you have to work at and build. It takes time. This last point is actually something that I had to continue to remind myself this week because I'm a person like, I don't like to sit down. And so I was being very hard on myself, trying to force myself into doing things. And my mom said to me, she said, you deserve to just sit there. She said, with everything you're dealing with, you deserve to just be. And it's okay. And once you get back up, you can go hard, go crazy, whatever it is you want to do. But right now, give yourself grace and be okay with just being. So, give yourself grace. It's not going to be easy. None of this is. Life ain't easy. If it was easy, we would all be extremely happy. I mean, weirdly happy. So let's recap. Let's talk about it. Vulnerability equal power, connection, and strength, right? Remember that. And your challenge for this week is really, and I want you to write this out. Where can I be more vulnerable at? Is it with friendships? Is it love and relationships? Is it career wise? Is it with family? Is it, within my business? Is it within my own podcast? Where can you be more vulnerable at? And write down all of the places you feel like you can be more vulnerable. And just keep it somewhere to where each week you can pick something new that you'll work at. Work your muscle, right? But thank you so much for watching today's episode. Please DM me, comment on this video, comment on our reels, TikToks, whatever you see. Tell us what you thought about this week's episode. There is power in vulnerability. Don't you forget that. And next week, we are actually going to be diving into how to own your story and take control of your narrative, right? So I'm super excited about that. You guys have a blessed day, a blessed week, and we will see you guys again on Thursday at the Women's Vault Podcast. Mwah.